They call it the day the music died. It was 60 years ago tonight. A plane went down just minutes after takeoff from the Mason City, Iowa airport. 4 young men were killed: Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, J.P. Richardson, and their pilot, Roger Peterson. It was a tragedy that shaped the music world forever, and it changed Clear Lake, Iowa forever, and eventually led one family here to Kansas City.
A long, long time ago,
I just remember standing in front of the stage.
I can still remember how that music used to make me smile.
February 2nd, 1959, Clear Lake, Iowa. As they did every week, hundreds of teenagers flocked to the Surf Ballroom for a dance party.
It becomes part of your life.
Linda Muth and Russ Rippon were there.
I was in 9th grade. I was 14 years old. And it just was a big deal for Mason City and Clear Lake, Iowa.
My friend and I, we talked it over, and we'd like to go see Buddy Holly.
It was the winter dance party. Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, the Big Bopper, and Dion were all slated to take the stage that night. The teenagers all got rides to the surf and waited outside in a long line to get in.
It was snowing and just kind of cold, actually really cold.
And it's snowing, okay? And it's snowing, and there's no wind, and it's like the Christmas snowflakes, you know, and it's landing on my coat.
The Surf Ballroom first opened in 1948 and remains very much the same inside today. The room, so rich with history, can easily take a music lover's breath away. Even the curtains on that iconic stage are the originals.
They were all out on the dance floor.
And everyone you talked to who was there that night remembers sitting in a booth, eventually making their way toward the stage once the show started.
Hello, baby.
When the Big Bopper sang Chantilly Lace, he looked right at us, and I'm sure each one of us thought he was singing to us.
Chantilly lace and a pretty face and a ponytail hanging down.
Buddy's standing here, and then like Richie Valens is probably standing here, as I remember, doing his thing.
Linda and Russ didn't know each other back then.
They've extended the stage.
Yeah, we were probably standing right here.
But the two have the same memories.
I remember that they were wearing suits and ties, and that was a little bit formal.
The young musicians took the stage and played song after song. There was no real interaction with the audience, no stories told about how each song was written, just the music. At one point, the DJ pulled Holly aside for a quick question and asked him how long he planned to stay in the music business.
He said, "Oh, I don't know, until I fall down." And I remember that the next day, and that was a very strange thing to say. But I swear that's what he said.
Right over here are the sinks that they've left on the wall that they say Buddy Holly washed his clothes in that night. It's just feet away from this spot where they say that infamous coin toss happened that would determine who would fly on the plane that night. They say after the decision was made, the 3 artists walked right over to this door, opened it up, and no one ever saw them again. The young stars were driven about 10 minutes away to the Mason City Airport, where they boarded the plane and took off about 1 a.m. The plane went down just a few miles from the airport, where the crash went undiscovered until about 8 hours later. 28-year-old J.P. Richardson, the Big Bopper, was found on one side of the fence. 22-year-old Buddy Holly was found on the other, laying just feet away from Richie Valens. Valens was just 17 years old. The pilot, Roger Peterson, was found inside the plane. It was a crash that stunned the world and one the young fans who were there that night never got over.
That's what I heard when I went into my mom's kitchen for breakfast, that there had been a crash.
I was walking down the hall, and some girls were crying by the locker. Well, they were the 2 girls that were crying, and so that seems like a movie, doesn't it? But I said, what's going on? She said, "Oh, well, Buddy Holly got killed in the crash."
I can't remember if I cried when I read about his widowed bride.
The surf is now listed in the National Register of Historic Places. Winter dance parties are still held here. And since the trio of musicians that spent their last night on this stage played here, it's been a popular venue for musical acts to perform now for decades. It's hard to wrap your head around the amount of talent that has stood on the stage here at the Surf. But just to give you an example, this room that's right off the stage is covered with the signatures of all the artists who've played here, including Nicky Sullivan. He played rhythm guitar on the majority of Holly's songs and eventually wound up in Kansas City.
Well, that'll be the day when you say goodbye.
Nicky Sullivan grew up in Lubbock, Texas, but spent the last 25 years of his life here in the Metro. Awesome. He and his wife raised their twin sons here, Marty and Aaron, and do they ever have some great stories. Sullivan found out years after playing with Holly the two were actually third cousins. He joined the Crickets when another guitarist got too nervous to audition for Holly.
Buddy's like, Nick, you've got a guitar? Why don't you go grab your guitar real quick and we'll just jam?
Buddy Holly had found his rhythm guitarist. Sullivan played on 27 out of Holly's 32 songs, all released in just a year and a half. He played to the nation on the Ed Sullivan Show alongside Holly and the rest of the Crickets. But a massive nationwide tour, the days spent crammed onto buses and even being segregated at different hotels night after night, took a toll on Sullivan.
The way he always described it, he said, we did 80 cities in 81 days, you know, and he's like, I woke up, I didn't know what city I was in.
Sullivan quit the band and was financially cut off. Most musicians would likely sue, and if they're Sullivan, they'd probably win millions. But Nicky Sullivan, despite the pleas of most everyone he knew, wasn't having it.
You never wanted to tarnish Buddy's name.
Right.
I mean, if you think of all the artists that have had contracts and disputes, from Clearance Clearwater Revival, Led Zeppelin, all these bands that have, and it tarnishes the legacy. And my dad always, was adamant. He always said, Buddy's not here to defend himself, and the last thing I'm ever going to do is tarnish
his name.
After all, they were close. It was Sullivan who was tasked with calling Holly's mother to break the devastating news after the plane crash.
And what he always said was, he said it felt like a piece of his soul, like being with what he had in his life. He's like, a part of everything that I was going for completely went away. And so that's why he never did music again. It broke him to a point.
What he did do was honor Holly every chance he got. Sullivan performed several times at the Surf, including the 20-year anniversary of the Winter Dance Party in 1979, his two little boys by his side. And he never lost sight of who mattered most in the music world, the fans.
He would get fan mail, and every time we're like, Dad, why are you taking the time? Let's go do this. He's like, I've got to write them back.
And
he'd
he handwrote
every person that ever wrote him, he would handwrite back.
Yep.
A special touch by Sullivan that no doubt made a difference for not only his fans, but those who loved Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, and Ritchie Valens.
What's crazy to me is at 6 years, there's still people interested in it. That's what's so awesome, you know.
Yeah, that we're sitting here even having this conversation right now.
Yeah.
Speaks about, one, the impact they had on the music industry, but also on the nation.
We just need this part of history for our children, your grandchildren, my grandchildren.
And for Linda and Russ in Iowa, the impact was great, and they want to preserve the memories for future generations.
It's a tribute to the music world.
As for American Pie, the song Don McLean wrote to commemorate the day the music died, for Linda and Russ, it holds just as much meaning as the memories of that night.
Yeah, it's just who I am.
It's incredible. I don't know why.
This'll be the day that I die.
And taking another live look at the Winter Dance Party happening right now in Clear Lake, Iowa. Our photographer, Greg Milota, made the trip up earlier today to bring you these live pictures on the 60th anniversary of the 1959 Winter Dance Party. Scheduled to appear this weekend are artists carrying on the tradition like Buddy Cochran and Chubby Checker.